it's great having this phrase, the hybrid organisation, but let me tell you, we've only just figured out what it means, never mind giving you guys the chance. But where it came from was last summer in fact, a group of us got together, not just from Microsoft, but from all different walks of life, thinking about the kind of changes that we see today, both in terms of societal changes, changes in the built environment, and certainly from our perspective, changes in technology. And what we felt was there were three great stories that had never been told. And so we commissioned some work, and we got Philip and Michael to help us. Philip wrote a paper on changes to the built environment. Michael wrote a paper on changes in society. And myself and a colleague from Microsoft Research wrote a paper on changes in technology. And what we'd like to do today is to present each of those three stories. Interesting as they are on their own, we think that the story that comes out when you superimpose them together is far more compelling. And that's the bit when we've finished our presentations, we'd like to talk to you in a kind of panel discussion format. So with that, if I could ask Michael to come up and start us off.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just take these notes so I remember what I'm going to say. That there are no PowerPoints, so you're just going to have to look at me, I'm afraid, but never mind.
My empathy.
I kind of, when I was putting my paper together, I started to think in terms of several questions. And my first question was, how is the workplace likely to evolve when we've got 3, possibly 4 generations of people working together with very, very different mental and emotional setups? And I'll talk about that in a moment. So that was one of the questions I asked. My other question was, and what does this mean for organisations in terms of the relationship between the organisation, its customers, its partners, and its workers, so as a kind of extended ecosystem, if you like. And those are my kind of key issues. And what I did was I looked back over the last 50 years or so. I was very, very interested in the role of the baby boomers, that's several of us looking around this room today, who were once the iconoclasts, the breakers of establishment, that have now become the establishment. That's actually the group that's running most of the organisations today. And I tried to contrast them and their use of technology and the society that they'd grown up and moulded with Generation Y. Now, I've missed out Generation X, so you can ask me later why I've missed out Generation X, but I'm not going to tell you now. But Generation Y particularly, which is the generation often referred to as the digital natives, the people that have grown up surrounded by this highly mobile, massively interactive world. And I kind of took those 2 points as being really, really important. And what I did was I kind of set up a little argument, if you like, not about generational warfare or anything like that, but just to see how these 2 generations could make space for one another. And my particular line was that it's the baby boomers that are today's establishment, so how are they going to make space and opportunity for Generation Y? And all of us that are being influenced by Generation Y behaviour as well, as many of the technologies become completely ever-present. And that was my question, because when I flipped it back and I looked at the baby boomers in the 60s and 70s, they had a real struggle to actually develop a voice. We'd got protests, all sorts of things, counterculture, all of that kind of thing was playing out. It was very vibrant. The tensions in society were really palpable at the time. So I asked myself the question, are we going to have that again? And is that going to be part of the kind of condition we find ourselves in today with economic turmoil, social turmoil, etc.? Or are the baby boomers going to manage things differently so that the workplace and relationships with the extended world is going to change in subtle ways that actually embrace all these different generations working together? So that was really where I I started, and I actually handed the responsibility to the baby boomers to do something about this. So it's many of us in this room that, in my belief, have to think about the way we organise things and the way we practice things to enable the hybrid organisation to come into existence. And what is the hybrid organisation? Well, it's actually embracing behavioural and social change in a workplace type environment. But it'll be us that's got to actually allow that to happen. And one of the rather interesting contrasts between the baby boomers and Generation Y is the way that both groups actually take a technology or set of technologies that were really developed by the immediately previous generation and actualize it tremendously. So the baby boomers are all about mass broadcast. Most of the technologies of mass broadcast were already available, but the baby boomers really energized them and used them. And from that group comes most of what we understand as marketing today, the projection and the building of big brand, of corporate structure, the telling, the broadcasting out from central and control points, etc. And that's very much the model that the baby boomer is used to. And we can all think of various brands that fit into that kind of structure. On the other hand, Generation Y are picking up technologies developed often by the group immediately before them, but they're social technologies. It's a different form of technology altogether. It's a technology that's about the person. It's not about broadcast and tell, it's about collaboration and engagement. It's about, and it's rather interesting, I think that Facebook announced the kind of Gmail type killer or whatever we're going to call the other day. And in the announcement, what did they say? They say people are turning away from email. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know, but they're turning away because they want lots of shorter, sharper interactions. They want to spend more of their time putting things in place. So that group have a different way of behaving. Typically, it's lots of shorter interactions. It arguably is less kind of linear, doesn't necessarily have a beginning, a middle and an end. It may lack depth at one level, as we would customarily know it, but it's brilliant at pulling lots of information together. It's also massively visual. So I find it really interesting when you get really senior corporate leaders saying, young people can't do the basics. Well, they've got to be able to do the basics, and I'm not arguing in favour of not being able to spell and all that kind of stuff. But in fact, they've not only got to be able to do that, but corporate leaders have got to accept the fact that there is a generation that actually interfaces with information and one another in a completely different way. Their involvement in information has been geared by personal technologies, which now are way ahead of corporate technologies. You know, if you think about the way you're using your personal devices at home and compare them very often to what you're using in the workplace, it's different again. So the essential challenge seems to me that the baby boomers, the establishment of today, accept that we are going to have to think very differently about the way we structure and use technologies and the way we have relationships in the workplace with all these generations to get the most out of them. And it's going to lead to significant change. And it's almost a misnomer to ask Generation Y to do what the baby boomers want. The baby boomers are going to have to, we are going to have to say, okay, how can we open things up to allow the real benefits that we've developed to actually come to pass? And that's the kind of basis of my paper. So it's looking forward to a much more interactive, access, socially based, linking of emotion and structure, kind of social structure within and beyond organisations. And for those of you that are interested, it goes on for pages, but please have a look at it. And I think that's probably my 10 minutes well and truly blown. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks to Michael, and over to Philip.
Michael, thank you. Well, to take the journey forward, the way we looked at the hybrid organisation was to kind of begin a journey. And that journey begins with the idea of jelly bean working. If you can have the slides up, please. The idea that we came up with was that the jelly bean is a definition for the future of work. And I hope in this short presentation I'll convince you that jelly bean working is where we're all heading. And it rhymes with this new brand we've launched, Unwork. It's one of our new businesses that will look at the future of work and help people predict this rise in jelly bean working. So we are on a journey. We're on a journey that's going to, I hope, take our evolution slightly more ambitiously to a world where we look at work in a cohesive way. And again, the idea of the hybrid organisation was to bring thinking around physical space with people and behaviours that we've heard lots about this morning, with technology, to really define this idea that work will be different. And the evolution, I think, has to adapt. It has to move forward. We have to see hybrid organisations taking us to a different platform. We looked at a number of pillars on which we base the hybrid organisation. And the pillars kind of challenge the traditional culture, that, the 4 and the 2 that we heard about from Charles, the way that we organise work to be very much about presenteeism, about bringing people in and supervising them. And the idea that home working has never really exploded in the way that it was predicted 20 years ago. I think working from home is often seen as shirking from home by many middle managers. And I think that jelly bean working will get rid of that problem, as I'll show you. The demographics Michael's explained, we're seeing tensions in the workplace. We're seeing tensions also in the boardroom. The idea that people are challenging gender, age, demographic and so on. And the tensions are there for us all to see. And I think when you look at Murdoch, who owns MySpace, who calls himself a digital immigrant, but his daughter's digital natives, the natives and the immigrants are at this kind of tension, this kind of trying to get this coexistence right. Because they expect and they want very different things from their technologies. As you've heard, email is dying for the next generation, whereas we're all still obsessed by it. And I think when you look at what comes next, they'll be even less reliant on the idea of email. The other pillars are fairly obvious. We can't carry on pouring people into our towns and cities. If you look at the figures, globally, we now spend about an hour 20 per day commuting in almost every region of the world. That's about 28 million hours a day in London alone. In Bangkok, 37 million hours a day is spent moving around the city. These are highly unproductive patterns of producing in a world that we're heading towards. And the United Nations figures show even more worrying problems coming as urban population moves from 3 billion today to 6.5 billion by 2050. Imagine our cities globally doubling in size in the next 30, 40 years. And we're at this crossroads. You can see from the graph that there are now more people living in cities globally than in rural areas. So this will carry on getting worse and worse if we keep to this idea that you commute in and you commute out of central business districts. It's highly unsustainable. The idea that we can bring that many people into a city to work in a traditional working pattern, we think can no longer be the case. And what frightens the sustainability consultants when I show them this is that, of course, buildings are therefore not used, they're half empty. So not only are we bringing people in, we're also lighting, cooling and heating buildings that are no longer being used by people. So this has to be challenged and has to change. And I think when you look at what's happening on real estate, everyone is now saying, well, can we also reduce the cost of property? Do we need all this underutilised, highly expensive, lit and cooled building? And I thought Microsoft's new campus in Schiphol, that was a case study in the hybrid organisation research, is a classic one because they have taken their technology and adopted a very different way of working. So for 1,100 people, they slimmed down their real estate by 30%. They've got much less space